you might have guessed, I watch a lot of movies. My favorites are science fiction, but I also watch action and dramas and thrillers, and I'll even admit the occasional romantic comedy. If you go to the movies a lot too, you may have noticed something that the vast majority of these films have in common. Most of the movies seem to be stories about men. One of the primary reasons Hollywood continually churns out films about men is because we live in a male-centered society. Most simply, male-centeredness is an aspect of patriarchy that shows us that we place and prioritize our attention on men and men's stories, the things men do, and the things men don't do. As a result, the images we see in the media often focus on male-centered stories. One way to demonstrate male-centeredness is to not only look at the films that are being made, but which films are most celebrated and honored. To do this, I looked up the films that won the Academy Award for Best Picture over the last 50 years. Let's see whose stories are being told. Starting in 2009 is The Hurt Locker, which although directed by a woman is still all about men. Slumdog Millionaire, men. No Country for Old Men, need I say more. The Departed is about men. Crash is an ensemble. Million Dollar Baby is interesting because it's pretty equally a story about a man and a woman. Lord of the Rings, men. Chicago is woman-centered. A Beautiful Mind, men. Gladiator is about a man who fights other men. American Beauty, man. Shakespeare in Love, man. Titanic is from a man's perspective. The English Patient, man. Braveheart, man. Forrest Gump, man. Schindler's List, man. The Unforgiven is about men on horses. Silence of the Lambs is about a man who eats people. And this is interesting because although Jodie Foster's character plays a pretty big role in the film, you would never describe it as a movie about an FBI agent who, you would describe it as a movie about Hannibal Lecter. Dances with Wolves, man. Driving Miss Daisy is about a man and a woman. Rain Man is about a man and his brother. The Last Emperor, man. Platoon, man. Out of Africa is woman-centered. Amadeus is about a man. Terms of Endearment is woman-centered. Gandhi is about a man, albeit a pretty extraordinary one. Chariots of Fire, men. Ordinary People is about a family. Kramer vs. Kramer is about a couple. Deer Hunter, men. Annie Hall is about a man and his love life. Rocky is about a man who fights other men, again. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, man. Godfather Part 2, men. The Sting is about two con men. Godfather Part 1, men. French Connection is about men. Patton, men. Midnight Cowboy is a man. Oliver is a boy. In the Heat of the Night is about men. A Man for All Seasons, man. Sound of Music is woman-centered. My Fair Lady is another interesting one because it's pretty equally about both a man and a woman's story. Tom Jones, man. Lawrence of Arabia is so male-centered that there aren't even any female speaking roles in it. West Side Story is about both a man and a woman. And finally, in 1960 is The Apartment, which is from a man's perspective. So only 4 out of 50 of these films are exclusively centered on women's lives. The vast majority are films about men and their lives, and although there are some ensemble casts, women often play secondary or stereotypical roles. Year after year, we see men's stories being created, produced, celebrated, and honored, while women's stories take a back seat or aren't even represented. And it's also behind the scenes in Hollywood that's dominated by men. It's astonishing that Kathryn Bigelow is the only woman to have ever won an Academy Award for Best Director in its 83-year history. And she won for The Hurt Locker in 2009, which is most definitely a male-centered film. In fact, only 4 women have ever even been nominated for Best Director. And what's even more startling is that women only account for 7% of all Hollywood directors. Hollywood executives, production companies, financial investors, and backers are most interested in marketing to young men and funding stories that they, as men, can relate to. Thus, they fund and produce the majority of Hollywood films to appeal to this demographic. Obviously, I want to see many, many more films that are centered on women's lives. However, it's important to note that just because a film is woman-centric doesn't mean it can't still be sexist. For instance, in so-called chick flicks, women are often depicted in stereotypical gender roles, being obsessed with shopping and love and finding Mr. Right. I want to see more films depict women as full and complete human beings, not stuck in stereotypical gender roles. And just so we're absolutely clear, I'm not saying men's stories aren't good, important, or interesting, but I just want to point out that they are disproportionately valued and most rewarded in our society. Here are a few simple questions you can keep in mind next time you're watching a movie to help you identify whether a story is male-centered or female-centered. Who has the most screen time? Whose perspective do we see the scene from? Whose story arc does the plot revolve around? Do we see them make decisions? And who do we most identify with?